Lady Isolde Wren knew a room had judged her before the solicitor broke the seal. London, 1817, had made an art of judgment, and the drawing-room of Larkspur House had perfected it beneath gilt mirrors, pale damask walls, and a chandelier bright enough to make every worn thread visible. She stood near the tall window because no one had invited her to sit. Outside, a thin spring rain silvered the glass and blurred the line of carriages waiting along Grosvenor Street. Inside, the air smelled of beeswax, bergamot, and old money. Lady Isolde kept her gloved hands folded at her waist, the left thumb resting lightly over the small brass key tied to a faded blue ribbon beneath her cuff. The key had no place among silk gowns and mourning crepe. It was plain, old, and darkened at the edges from years of being held too tightly. It was also the only thing in that room that had ever been given to her without calculation. "You are very pale, cousin," Lady Celia Harlow said, not softly enough to be kind and not loudly enough to be called cruel. She sat upon the blue settee with a posture so graceful it looked rehearsed, one white hand resting over the black ribbon at her throat. Celia had chosen mourning colours that flattered her. Isolde had chosen the only black gown she owned, turned twice by a sempstress who had apologized as though poverty were contagious. "I hope the strain is not too much for you." "I am quite well," Isolde said. Her voice did not tremble. She had learned years ago that trembling encouraged people who enjoyed small wounds. Sir Percival Harlow looked up from the hearth, where he had been speaking with Mr. Bellamy, the solicitor. Sir Percival was not a large man, but he arranged himself as though every room belonged to him by moral right. His silver hair, polished boots, and carefully sorrowful expression gave him the appearance of a guardian grieving with admirable discipline. Isolde knew the performance well. He had worn the same expression when refusing her a new cloak last winter, explaining that economy was a virtue in dependent women. "Celia means only that this is a solemn day," Sir Percival said. "Lord Avington was generous to you in life, my dear. It would be unbecoming to meet his final wishes with agitation. My dear." The words landed with the softness of a handkerchief and the weight of a chain. Several relatives shifted in their chairs. Lady Harlow dabbed at eyes that had not reddened. A distant cousin from Bath whispered behind her fan. Isolde did not turn her head. She had spent 11 years in that household learning the geography of being tolerated. There was the chair one did not take because it belonged to guests of consequence. There was the bell one did not ring because servants were for the family, not for the poor relation. There was the smile one wore when reminded, in delicate phrases, that gratitude was the rent charged upon charity. Lord Avington had been the one exception. Her mother's old friend, her father's last loyal correspondent, and the only gentleman who had looked at Isolde after her parents died and seen neither inconvenience nor opportunity. He had visited Larkspur House twice each year, always with a book under one arm and some dry remark about the foolishness of people who mistook money for judgment. On his last visit, his hand had trembled when he pressed the brass key into hers. "Keep it," he had said, his voice low enough that even the footman beside the door could not hear. "A day will come when someone tells you to forget what belongs to you. Open what they prefer to keep shut." She had asked what it opened. He had only smiled sadly. "Courage, I hope." Now Lord Avington was dead, and courage stood with cold fingers inside a patched glove. Mr. Bellamy cleared his throat at the long table placed before the hearth. He was a narrow man with cautious eyes and a leather case full of papers. 2 red seals lay broken beside him. A third remained intact. Isolde noticed Sir Percival glance at that third seal and then away too quickly. So did Celia. Her cousin's smile sharpened for one bright instant before smoothing into grief. "We should begin," Sir Percival said. "It does not serve the ladies to prolong distress." "Of course," Mr. Bellamy replied. He adjusted his spectacles. "This is the last will and testament of the Right Honourable Lord Avington, witnessed properly and lodged in accordance with his instructions." Lady Harlow sighed as though the word instructions pained her. Celia lowered her gaze. Isolde remained beside the window. The rain tapped softly against the glass. Mr. Bellamy read first of modest gifts. A silver watch to an old valet. A set of botanical volumes to a nephew who visibly resented receiving books instead of land. A small annuity to a housekeeper who had served Lord Avington for 32 years. Isolde felt warmth move through her chest at that. Lord Avington had remembered the people who had carried trays, folded linens, trimmed lamps, and made his life comfortable while society praised only the guests at his table. Then came the larger bequests. A property in Kent to a married niece. A collection of paintings to a cousin. Funds set aside for debts, servants' wages, and parish relief. Sir Percival's mouth tightened at each sensible provision. He liked generosity best when it passed through his own hand first. Isolde listened without expectation. Expectation was a luxury, and she had given it up piece by piece. A pearl brooch sold to pay a dressmaker. A pianoforte closed because lessons were no longer practical. A season cut short because no one wished to sponsor a young woman with no dowry, no mother, and too much quiet intelligence to be charmingly helpless. Celia leaned toward the lady beside her and murmured, "Poor Isolde must be anxious. One does wonder what becomes of a woman when charity reaches its natural end." A fan snapped open. Someone gave a small breath of amusement and tried to disguise it as a cough. Heat touched Isolde's face. She kept her eyes on the rain. She had discovered long ago that humiliation grew larger when fed with protest. Sir Percival did not rebuke his daughter. He merely looked at Isolde with grave disappointment, as if she had embarrassed him by being insulted. "My dear," he said, "whatever Lord Avington has arranged, you may trust that I shall continue to advise you. A lady in your position must be guided carefully." "In my position?" Isolde asked before she could stop herself. The room stilled. Celia's lashes lifted. Sir Percival's brows drew together, not in anger, but in warning. Mr. Bellamy froze with the paper held halfway between table and candlelight. Isolde felt the old key beneath her thumb. Its edge pressed through the worn glove, small and definite. She drew one breath and made her voice mild. "Forgive me. I only wondered which position you meant. Mourner, dependent, or inconvenience." No one laughed. That was the first victory of the day. Sir Percival's expression cooled. "Grief makes people speak unwisely." "Then perhaps we should hear Lord Avington," Isolde said. Her heart beat hard enough that she felt it in her throat, but her hand stayed folded. "Mr." Bellamy lowered his eyes to the page again. Something like approval flickered across his face and vanished. "There remains," he said, "a provision concerning Lady Isolde Wren." Chairs creaked. Celia sat straighter. Lady Harlow ceased dabbing her eyes. Sir Percival stepped away from the hearth. Isolde had prepared herself for a token. Perhaps a book. Perhaps a small sum to make her departure from Larkspur House less openly cruel. Perhaps nothing but a kind line written in a dead man's hand, which might have been more dangerous than money because kindness, once remembered, made neglect harder to endure. Mr. Bellamy continued. "Lord Avington directs that a sealed packet, deposited under private instruction and concerning Lady Isolde's future settlement, be opened in the presence of Sir Percival Harlow, Lady Celia Harlow, and such witnesses as are assembled here today." Sir Percival moved too quickly. "That will not be necessary at this moment." The words were smooth, but the room heard the crack beneath them. Mr. Bellamy looked up. "My instructions are explicit. I am her guardian in all practical matters." Lord Avington anticipated that objection. The air changed. Isolde felt it before she understood it. Not merely surprise. Fear. It came from Sir Percival like heat from a covered flame. Mr. Bellamy reached for the third seal. Celia's fingers tightened around her fan. Lady Harlow whispered, "Percival." He did not answer. The solicitor broke the seal. Red wax split with a soft, final sound. Isolde's thumb pressed harder against the brass key. A strange certainty moved through her, unwelcome and clear. Whatever lay in that packet had not been written to comfort her. It had been written because Lord Avington had known someone would try to take something from her after he was gone. Mr. Bellamy unfolded the document. His eyes moved down the page. Once. Twice. His composure faltered. Every person in the room leaned toward him without seeming to move. Even the rain at the window seemed to quiet. Sir Percival said, very softly, "Bellamy." It was not a request. It was a threat dressed as a name. The solicitor swallowed. Then he read aloud, and the first word struck the drawing room like a match touched to dry silk. The name of His Grace, Adrian Vale, Duke of Harrowmere, is central to the condition. For one suspended moment after Mr. Bellamy spoke the Duke's name, no one in the drawing-room breathed as if breathing itself might invite him through the door. His Grace, Adrian Vale, Duke of Harrowmere, was not a man society mentioned lightly. Mothers lowered their voices when discussing him near daughters. Gentlemen laughed at his severity only when he was at least 10 miles away. Even Sir Percival, who could make a sermon out of his own importance, had once described the Duke as a man who could ruin a liar by looking at him until the truth lost courage. Isolde had never met him. She had seen him once from across a crowded assembly room, a tall figure in black standing apart from the candles and colour, while every ambitious mother in London pretended not to watch him. He had not danced. He had not smiled. He had left before supper, and still the room spoke of nothing else for 20 minutes. Now his name lay in the middle of Larkspur House like a drawn blade. Celia found her voice first. Surely there must be some mistake. Her tone was light, but her fan had stopped moving. What possible concern could His Grace have with Cousin Isolde? It was the wrong question to ask before witnesses. Its cruelty was too naked. Lady Harlow glanced at her daughter with alarm, then at Isolde with that soft resentment some women reserved for the poor when they became inconveniently central. Sir Percival did not look at either of them. His gaze fixed upon the paper in Mr. Bellamy's hands. "Read carefully," he said. "I intend to," Mr. Bellamy replied. That quiet defiance sent another ripple through the room. The solicitor smoothed the page with 2 fingers. Lord Avington writes, in consideration of promises made in confidence and of duties neglected by those who should have protected her, I direct that Lady Isolde Wren be granted the settlement described in the accompanying packet, including the annuity, the right of residence, and the portion reserved in trust. A sound moved through the relatives, part surprise, part calculation. A portion. A right of residence. An annuity. 3 phrases, and Isolde felt the room measure her anew. Not as a cousin in last year's mourning. Not as a dependent woman near the window. As money. As leverage. As danger. Sir Percival stepped forward. That language is irregular. The language is Lord Avington's, Mr. Bellamy said. The settlement, however, is subject to a condition. Isolde's fingers tightened over the little key. She did not know why the word condition chilled her more than the Duke's name. What condition? Lady Harlow asked. Mr. Bellamy hesitated. It was brief, but Isolde saw it. So did Sir Percival. Proceed, he said. The solicitor read. Lady Isolde Wren shall be placed under the protection and consideration of His Grace, Adrian Vale, Duke of Harrowmere, with expectation of a marriage arrangement, should both parties satisfy the requirements set forth in the sealed codicil. Marriage? Celia repeated. This time she forgot to be graceful. The word broke from her like a dropped glass. Around the room, chairs whispered against carpet. The Bath cousin gave an audible gasp. Lady Harlow pressed her hand to her chest. Sir Percival's face changed only in the eyes. For the first time that morning, Isolde understood something with perfect clarity. He had known there was a condition. He had not known the solicitor would read it before everyone. This is absurd, Celia said, then caught herself and softened the insult into a laugh. I only mean, how extraordinary. Cousin Isolde and the Duke of Harrowmere. It sounds like something from a circulating novel. Celia, Lady Harlow murmured. No, Mamma, forgive me, but one must be honest. His Grace is not a charitable institution. Isolde felt the word strike, but not where Celia intended. They did not wound the part of her that feared being unwanted. That part was old and scarred over. They struck the newer, sharper place where Lord Avington's kindness had begun to look like another man's arrangement. She had not asked for an annuity. She had not asked for a portion. She had certainly not asked to be placed, considered, and possibly married like a parcel moving between estates. Mr. Bellamy, Sir Percival said, his voice heavy with authority, it would be wiser to suspend the reading until I have reviewed the document privately. Lady Isolde is overwrought. Such matters cannot be understood by a young woman without guidance. Isolde turned from the window at last. I am not overwrought. Her voice was calm enough to make the denial worse for him. And I understood every word. Sir Percival gave her the look he used when she had spoken above her station at table. My dear, you must not mistake shock for comprehension. I did not. Mr. Bellamy looked down quickly, perhaps to hide approval again. Celia rose from the settee in a soft rustle of black silk. She came toward Isolde with the intimate smile of a woman carrying a pin hidden in lace. You must see this as good fortune, she said. No one is insulting you. Indeed, it is rather more than any of us expected for you. A duke's name attached to yours, even by obligation, is no small mercy. No small mercy. Isolde thought of all the small mercies she had been taught to accept. The heel of Celia's slipper grinding lightly into the edge of her gown at a ball, followed by an apology sweet enough to be admired. A place at dinner when there was no more important guest. A discarded bonnet trimmed again so it might pass for kindness. The permission to remain at Larkspur House, provided she made herself useful and never visible at the wrong time. Mercy, in that house, always arrived with a collar. Mr. Bellamy lifted another sheet. There is mention of the sealed codicil. Enough, Sir Percival said. The word cut across the room. I will not permit Lord Avington's eccentricities to make a spectacle of my household. Lady Isolde will accept the protection intended for her, and I will correspond with his grace on her behalf. On her behalf. The old phrase. The old door closing. Isolde looked at the brass key tie beneath her cuff. Lord Avington had told her to open what others preferred shut. She had thought he meant a drawer, perhaps a box, something made of wood and hinges. Now she understood he had meant a moment. A woman's life could be locked as surely as any room. No, she said. It was not loud. It did not need to be. The drawing-room went still around it. Sir Percival blinked once. What did you say? I said no. Celia's smile vanished, then returned too brightly. Isolde, don't be foolish. You cannot refuse a provision you do not even understand. I am not refusing money because I do not understand it, Isolde said. I am refusing the manner in which it is being placed around my throat. Lady Harlow inhaled sharply. Mr. Bellamy's pen rolled an inch across the table and stopped. Sir Percival's voice lowered. You will not speak so dramatically in company. Then perhaps company should not be invited to watch a woman disposed of. The words cost her. She felt the cost in the silence that followed. It would have been easier to lower her eyes and let Sir Percival manage everything. Easier was what had kept her fed, sheltered, and quietly diminished for years. She drew the blue ribbon from beneath her cuff. The old brass key swung against her palm, dull and small and suddenly heavier than any jewel in the room. Celia stared at it. Sir Percival stared harder. Where did you get that? He asked. Isolde heard the fear beneath the anger. So did Mr. Bellamy. Lord Avington gave it to me, she said. Years ago. You should have surrendered it with his effects. It was not among his effects. It was mine. The last word steadied her. Mine. The room had not allowed her many such words. She held the key in her gloved hand and faced the solicitor. Mr. Bellamy, am I required to answer this condition now? No legal answer can be compelled this instant, he said carefully. Sir Percival turned on him. Bellamy. That is the truth, the solicitor said. Isolde nodded once. Then she turned back to the room that had expected gratitude, compliance, perhaps tears. Then my answer is this. I will not be passed from one man's will into another man's possession. If his grace wishes to marry me, he may ask me. Silence struck harder than any applause could have done. Celia's lips parted. Lady Harlow looked faint with outrage. Sir Percival's face became so still it seemed carved. The relative stared as though the poor relation by the window had stepped through a portrait frame and become inconveniently alive. Isolde's heart hammered, but she did not take the words back. She had spoken them, and speaking had changed the air. Even if she lost every coin Lord Avington had meant for her, even if Sir Percival made her pay for this before evening, some invisible door inside her had opened. Mr. Bellamy folded the paper slowly, his eyes not on Sir Percival now, but on Isolde. For the first time in years, a man in that room seemed to be waiting for her decision rather than preparing to correct it. Then the latch of the drawing-room door sounded. A footman appeared, pale and rigid. Behind him stood a tall man in a dark coat beaded with rain, one gloved hand resting upon the silver head of a cane. His face was controlled, unsmiling, and colder than the spring light behind him. Every person in the room rose or half rose in startled recognition. Isolde did not move. She could not. The man's gaze passed over Sir Percival, over Celia, over the papers on the table, and came to rest on the brass key in Isolde's hand. Then, with terrifying courtesy, His Grace, the Duke of Harrowmere, said, "Then I am fortunate, Lady Isolde, that I arrived in time to ask." The Duke of Harrowmere did not raise his voice, yet every person in the drawing-room behaved as though a command had been given. Lady Harlow rose fully from her chair, then seemed uncertain whether to curtsy or faint. Celia stepped backward, her hand closing around her fan until the painted sticks bent beneath her fingers. Sir Percival alone managed to advance, but even his movement had lost its usual ease. His polished authority looked smaller in the presence of a man who did not need to prove his. Adrian Vale stood just inside the threshold, rain darkening the shoulders of his coat, his black hair brushed back from a face made severe by restraint rather than age. He was not handsome in the soft, fashionable way that poets praised after supper. He was all controlled angles, quiet eyes, and a mouth that appeared to have forgotten every useless expression. A silver-headed cane rested under his right hand, though he did not lean on it so much as allow it to announce that weakness, if it existed, belonged to him alone and not to any observer. "Your Grace," Sir Percival said, recovering first because men like him had built entire lives upon quick recoveries. "This is an unexpected honor. Had we known you intended to call, I should have arranged a more suitable reception. I did not come for a reception." The Duke's gaze remained on Isolde for one heartbeat longer, then moved to Mr. Bellamy. "I came because a note reached me at my house this morning suggesting Lord Avington's instructions were to be opened today without delay. It was unsigned. That made it interesting." Mr. Bellamy stiffened. "Your Grace, I was not aware any note had been sent to you." "No. I gathered as much." The Duke crossed the room with measured steps. The distance from door to table could not have been more than 15 feet, yet society would speak of that walk for weeks if any gossip survived the morning intact. Nobody blocked him. Nobody thought to. Isolde remained beside the window with the old key cold in her palm, too aware of the worn seam across her left glove and the sudden beating of her heart. She had spoken bravely before he entered because he had been an idea. A name. A threat inside a document. Now he was a man standing near enough for her to see the rain caught along the edge of his cuff. "Mr. Bellamy," he said, read the relevant clause again. Sir Percival's jaw tightened. "Your Grace, I must object. Lady Isolde has already displayed considerable agitation. Such a public repetition may distress her further." The Duke turned his head. Slowly. It was not a glare. It was worse, because it contained no anger at all. "Lady Isolde has a voice." The words fell cleanly into the room. "If distress prevents her from using it, she may say so. If it does not, you will not borrow her silence for your convenience." A small sound escaped Lady Harlow. Celia looked down as if the carpet had become fascinating. Isolde felt heat rise behind her eyes and forced it back. She had been defended before, on rare occasions, but always as one defended a fragile object. No one had ever defended her right not to be fragile. Mr. Bellamy adjusted the paper again. "The provision states that Lady Isolde Wren shall be placed under the protection and consideration of His Grace, Adrian Vale, Duke of Harrowmere, with expectation of a marriage arrangement, should both parties satisfy the requirements set forth in the sealed codicil." "Expectation," the Duke repeated. "Not command." Sir Percival's hand closed at his side. "Legal language often employs softness where intention is plain." "Indeed. Which is why I prefer to see the original intention." The Duke held out one gloved hand. "The packet." "Mr. Bellamy hesitated only because solicitors were trained to hesitate before handing documents to anyone, even dukes. Then he passed the papers across the table. Adrian Vale studied the seal, the fold, and the edge where wax had broken. He did not rush. The silence stretched until it became unbearable. Isolde saw his thumb pause over a faint mark near the lower fold, a small abrasion in the paper, hardly visible from where she stood. His eyes narrowed. This packet has been handled before today. Sir Percival gave a soft laugh. It has been in legal custody. That is not what I said. The Duke looked at Bellamy. Was it opened in your office? No, Your Grace. Was it damaged when delivered to you? Not to my knowledge. Then we have either careless ghosts or living hands. No one laughed. Celia moved abruptly, perhaps to sit, perhaps to draw attention away from her father's expression. In doing so, she brushed against Isolde, or seemed to. Her fingers closed briefly over the blue ribbon at Isolde's wrist. What an odd little thing, she said, bright and sharp. Surely this is not the moment to cling to trinkets. Isolde drew back, but Celia's ring caught the worn fabric of her glove. The seam tore with a soft, humiliating sound. It was not pain that made Isolde still. It was the exposure. The faded darns along the glove, the thin places at the knuckles, the careful poverty she had tried to keep discreet, all opened beneath the eyes of the room. A scrap of grey silk fluttered to the carpet. Celia's lips parted in a perfect imitation of regret. Oh, cousin, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to spoil it. The apology was worse than the tear. Isolde curled her fingers inward, hiding the frayed edge of the glove and the key beneath it. Before she could step back, the Duke bent and picked up the fallen scrap. He did not hand it to a servant. He did not smile at the accident. He placed the torn piece upon the silver salver beside the wool packet as though it were evidence. Then he turned to Celia. Lady Celia, if you intend to examine a lady's belongings, I advise asking first. It prevents accidents from resembling habits. Celia went white, then pink. Your Grace, I only meant to help. Then you have learned something useful. Help that requires tearing is usually another name for interference. The room absorbed the correction in stunned silence. Isolde looked at the scrap of glove on the salver and felt something strange move through her. Not gratitude exactly. Gratitude was what people like Sir Percival demanded after giving what they should not have withheld. This was different. The Duke had not called attention to her poverty. He had called attention to the hand that tried to shame it. Sir Percival stepped between his daughter and further disgrace. Your Grace, I fear this conversation has wandered from the matter at hand. On the contrary, Adrian said. It has become clearer. He looked at Isolde then, directly, and the room seemed to recede a little. Lady Isolde, did Lord Avington give you that key? Her fingers tightened around it. Yes. When? Several years ago. Did he say what it opened? Not plainly. Her voice steadied as she spoke. He said a day would come when I must open what others preferred to keep shut. The Duke's eyes shifted, not with surprise, but recognition. Avington always did enjoy sounding like an oracle when a plain warning would have served. Against every instinct, Isolde almost smiled. Almost. Sir Percival did not. A sentimental remembrance has no bearing upon legal arrangements. You are very eager to decide what bears upon them. The Duke returned the packet to Mr. Bellamy, but his gaze remained on Percival. Where is the sealed codicil mentioned in the provision? Mr. Bellamy frowned. It was not included in the packet I received. Not included, the Duke said. The words were quiet enough to be dangerous. Yet referenced. Sir Percival spread his hands with practiced patience. Lord Avington was elderly. Such inconsistencies are regrettable but hardly sinister. Everything is hardly sinister until someone profits by it. The Duke let that sentence rest in the room. Then he looked back at Isolde. You said if I wished to marry you, I might ask. Her breath caught, but she refused to lower her gaze. I did. Then I will begin with a smaller question, because marriage should not be used to close a trap one has not yet examined. Celia gave a tiny, incredulous sound. Lady Harlow whispered her name, but the Duke ignored both. He took one step toward Isolde and stopped at a distance that honored propriety. Lady Isolde, will you allow me the honor of speaking with you? Not as property named in a will. Not as a responsibility passed across a table. As yourself. Isolde felt the room waiting for her to be sensible. To be grateful. To be frightened into obedience by the weight of a duke's attention. She was frightened, but not of him. She was frightened at the possibility that the first powerful man to ask her a question might actually expect an answer. "Yes, Your Grace," she said. "I will allow it." A faint shift moved across his face, almost too restrained to be called approval. "Thank you." Sir Percival's control cracked. "This is most irregular." The Duke did not turn. "So is a missing codicil." "You imply too much." "No, Sir Percival. I imply very little. It is often more efficient to let facts become impolite on their own." Mr. Bellamy lowered his eyes to the table. Celia stood rigid beside the settee, her wounded pride sharper than any apology she might have offered. Isolde looked again at the torn glove lying upon the salver. A small, ruined thing. A thing everyone would have dismissed if the Duke had not made it impossible to ignore. Adrian Vale followed her glance. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, meant for the room yet somehow reaching only her. "If there is a bond between us, madam, it shall not be forged by fraud or fear." Then he faced the others, and the feared Duke of Harrowmere became exactly what society had warned he was. Not loud. Not cruel. Unavoidable. "Mr. Bellamy, secure every paper." "Sir Percival, no document leaves this house." "Lady Isolde, when you are ready, we shall hear what Lord Avington wished you to know before anyone else explains it away." The morning room at Larkspur House had been chosen because propriety demanded a door that remained open and a witness who could pretend not to listen. Lady Harlow sat near the hearth with her embroidery untouched in her lap, looking as though she had been sentenced to supervise a scandal rather than prevent one. Mr. Bellamy had withdrawn to the writing table with the will packet under both hands, while Sir Percival lingered in the corridor beyond the half-open door, too proud to enter uninvited and too anxious to leave. Isolde saw his shadow fall across the polished floorboards each time he shifted. She saw Celia pass once behind him, her silk skirts whispering like a secret being carried away. The Duke of Harrowmere saw it too. He did not look at the doorway, yet Isolde knew he had marked every movement. That was what unsettled her most. His stillness was not indifference. It was attention under discipline. Adrian Vale stood beside the mantel, one hand resting upon the silver head of his cane, the other holding the torn packet Mr. Bellamy had surrendered for inspection. He had removed his rain-darkened gloves. His hands were long, steady, and marked faintly across the knuckles, not with ornament but with old consequence. Isolde remained near a chair she had not yet taken. Habit kept her standing. Pride made it difficult to sit only after he gestured. "Lady Isolde," he said, "you need not stand because others have left you no place." The words were not tender. That was why they nearly undid her. Tenderness could be dismissed as performance. Accuracy could not. She lowered herself into the nearest chair with care, folding her damaged glove beneath the other hand. The blue ribbon and brass key rested against her wrist, visible now, no longer hidden beneath the cuff. Lady Harlow's needle flashed once, then stilled. The Duke noticed the gesture without honoring it. "I will speak plainly," he said. "I do not take a wife from a clause I have not examined, a packet that shows signs of interference, or a room where the lady concerned is pressed before she is informed." Isolde's throat tightened, but her reply came level. "That is a courteous beginning, Your Grace. It is not yet a guarantee." Something passed through his eyes. Not amusement exactly. Respect, perhaps, sharpened by surprise. "No. It is not. Mr." Bellamy glanced up and then down again, pretending deep devotion to the page before him. Lady Harlow made a faint sound of disapproval. Sir Percival's shadow in the hall lengthened. Isolde kept her gaze on the Duke. "If I am to be discussed, I would prefer not to be discussed as a burden pass between gentlemen." "Agreed. If I am to be protected, I would prefer protection that does not require my silence." "Agreed. And if marriage is ever mentioned again, I would prefer that everyone in this house remember I am not a gate, a dowry chest, or an obligation dressed in black." The Duke looked at her for one suspended second. "Also agreed." Lady Harlow dropped her embroidery thread. "Your Grace, surely you cannot mean to indulge such language." "I rarely indulge anything, Lady Harlow." His voice remained even. I am listening to it. Isolde felt the smallest, most dangerous warmth enter her chest. She did not trust it. Warmth had led many women to mistake relief for safety. Safety required terms. She had learned that in rooms where every kindness came with a hidden account. Then I have 3 conditions, she said. Before anything proceeds. Name them. The directness almost startled her. She had expected resistance, persuasion, perhaps a polished reminder that dukes were not accustomed to being conditioned by poor relations. Instead, he waited. First, she said, the truth of Lord Avington's instructions must be found before any public announcement is made about my future. Yes. Second, if your name is used beside mine in society, it will not be used to suggest I have been purchased by fortune, rescued by pity, or concealed for convenience. Yes. Third, no marriage will occur unless I am free to refuse it without losing my character before the world. Lady Harlow gasped. In the corridor, Sir Percival stepped close enough that his shoe brushed the threshold. The Duke did not move. He did not smile. He did not soften the gravity of what she had asked. Those are not unreasonable conditions. Many people would say they are unreasonable from me. Many people enjoy confusing rank with conscience. The answer silenced even Lady Harlow. Isolde looked down at the key because looking at him had become more difficult than she wished to admit. He was not kind in the way Lord Avington had been kind. Lord Avington had warmed rooms. Harrowmere altered their temperature. Yet there was something bracing in him, like cold air after too many hours spent breathing perfume and deceit. You spoke of a sealed codicil, the Duke said to Mr. Bellamy. Where was it last recorded? Mr. Bellamy opened a small ledger from his case. Lord Avington's letter of instruction mentions a codicil packet to be produced with the main provision. My office received the outer packet only 3 days ago from Sir Percival's steward, with a note that all relevant papers were enclosed. They were enclosed, Sir Percival said from the doorway. He had stepped in at last. If Bellamy has misplaced a sheet, that is hardly a family conspiracy. No one said conspiracy, the Duke replied. You are eager to defend yourself against a charge not yet made. Sir Percival's cheeks flushed, but he recovered. I will not be baited in my own house. Then do not bite. The words were quiet. They landed with humiliating precision. Isolde lowered her gaze to hide the sudden, improper urge to laugh. Celia appeared behind her father now, pale with anger and curiosity. This is intolerable, she said. Cousin Isolde is being encouraged to think herself wronged by everyone who has cared for her. I've cared for her, Sir Percival said quickly. I've housed her, clothed her, protected her name. Isolde looked at her torn glove on the edge of her lap. 100 answers rose, each one true and useless. The Duke spoke before she had to choose one. Then your accounts will reflect generosity. Sir Percival went very still. Mr. Bellamy's pen paused above the ledger. Celia's gaze sharpened. There it was. The first crack. Not in a wall, but in a performance. The Duke turned back to the solicitor. The packet was handled by a steward. The codicil is missing. The outer seal shows disturbance. There is, however, an older mark here. He lifted the folded paper and angled it toward the light. House of Vale wax. Mr. Bellamy rose and came closer. Yes. I see a trace of dark blue at the fold. My family seal, the Duke said. Broken before this packet reached me, or before I knew it existed. Isolde felt the room narrow around that sentence. Lord Avington sent something to you. It appears he intended to. Adrian's eyes moved to her key. Whether it was prevented or delayed is the question. Sir Percival gave a dismissive breath. Old men misdirect letters. Servants lose things. Wax marks prove nothing. Then you will not object when I prove what they do mean. The Duke took a small folded note from within the packet, one that had been pressed between heavier sheets. It was creased, overlooked, and written in a hand weaker than the main document. Mr. Bellamy leaned in. Isolde stood before she realized she had moved. The Duke did not unfold it immediately. Instead, he looked at her. This concerns the key. Her pulse beat once, hard. Read it. It may contain something private. Then Lord Avington should have hidden it better. For the first time, Adrian Vale's mouth changed. Not into a smile. Into the memory of one. He unfolded the note. The handwriting was Lord Avington's, uneven but unmistakable. He read aloud. The key must remain with the girl. If Harlow presses before the codicil is read, ask what door he fears. No one moved. The morning room seemed to hold itself rigid around Sir Percival. Celia's face had lost every trace of practised sweetness. Lady Harlow whispered her husband's name, and this time he did not answer. Isolde looked at the small brass key in her palm. For years, she had thought it a relic of kindness. Now it had become a question powerful enough to frighten the man who had governed her life. The Duke folded the note with care and placed it beside the wool packet. Lady Isolde, he said, and his voice no longer filled the room. It crossed it to reach only her. I will find the door. I will find the codicil. Until then, no one in this house will compel your answer. Sir Percival drew himself upright. You overstep, your grace. Adrian turned toward him at last. The air changed again. No, he said. Someone overstepped before I arrived. I am merely deciding how far. Then he looked back at Isolde, not as a savior claiming gratitude, but as a man placing a blade flat upon a table and waiting to see whether she would choose to pick it up. Your conditions are accepted. Isolde closed her hand around the key. Then so is your investigation. By noon, every clock in Larkspur House seemed to be counting toward something no one wished to name. The house had not changed, yet Isolde felt each corridor differently now, as though the polished floors and ancestral portraits had been listening for years and only now dared to remember. She stood in the small breakfast parlour while Mr. Bellamy sorted Lord Avington's papers at the table and the Duke of Harrowmere examined the broken seal beneath the pale light from the window. Lady Harlow had claimed a headache and withdrawn. Sir Percival had retreated to his study after declaring the entire morning an unfortunate excess of imagination. Celia, however, had not retreated. Isolde could feel her cousin's anger somewhere nearby, moving through the house in silk slippers and silence. You remember the day Lord Avington gave you the key? The Duke asked. He did not look up from the envelope. Isolde touched the blue ribbon at her wrist. Yes. Tell me precisely. Precisely. Other people asked for memories and then shaped them to suit their purpose. The Duke asked as though truth were a structure and every small stone mattered. It was autumn. 3 years ago. He had come for dinner, though Sir Percival said he was too ill to travel. Afterward, he found me in the East Gallery and gave me the key. Did anyone see? I do not think so. She paused. He told me someone would ask me to forget what belonged to me. The Duke's eyes lifted. And what did you believe he meant? At the time? Nothing sensible. A faint ache moved through her chest. I thought he was being kind to a woman who had very little to keep. Mr. Bellamy folded his hands over the papers. Lord Avington was not careless in legal matters. Sentiment alone would not explain the note. No, the Duke said. Nor the missing codicil. He placed the envelope before Isolde. Look here. She stepped closer, aware of the proper distance, aware also that his attention never crowded her. The envelope bore a faint dark blue mark where wax had once clung and been disturbed. Beneath it, in a margin almost hidden by the fold, someone had written a short instruction in a smaller hand. Deliver through Harlow. Isolde stared. Something about the slant of the H, the narrow loop of the L, struck a buried memory. Sir Percival's handwriting was elegant when meant for others and impatient when meant for servants. This was not the elegant version. This was the version she had seen on household instructions, account notes, and cold little lists of economies in which her needs appeared last. That is Sir Percival's hand, she said. Mr. Bellamy drew in a breath. The Duke did not appear surprised. You are certain? I have copied enough household lists for him to know when his patience has run thin. The words escaped before she softened them. The Duke heard the history beneath them. His expression did not change, but his hand grew still upon the table. Then he handled a packet he later claimed merely to receive. That does not prove he removed anything, Mr. Bellamy said cautiously. No, the Duke replied. It proves he had the opportunity to do so before he began insisting there was nothing to find. Isolde looked at the old key. Its brass surface was warm from her skin. For years, it had been her private relic of being remembered. Now it had become a door she could not yet see. If it opens a room in this house, I do not know which one. Then we shall discover it. We? The word came out before pride could stop it. Adrian Vale met her eyes. You hold the key. I would be a fool to pretend the search belongs to me. No flourish. No gallantry. Just fact. It unsettled her more deeply than flattery could have done. Before she could answer, the door opened and Celia appeared with a smile bright enough to be a warning. There you are. Mamma asks that we not allow this gloomy business to ruin luncheon. Countess Morley and the Mrs. Fane have arrived, and one must keep up appearances, even when wills and widows and odd little keys make everyone forget themselves. Her gaze flicked to the papers, then to Isolde. You will join us, cousin. It would look strange if you hid. Isolde understood at once. Celia did not want company. She wanted witnesses. The Duke understood too. Lady Isolde is occupied. With legal papers? Celia's laugh was light. How learned we have all become in a single morning. Isolde felt the old instinct rise. Step back. Let someone else answer. Survive the room by becoming smaller than the insult. She closed her fingers around the key and released them again. I will come to luncheon, she said. The Duke's gaze moved to her, measuring not weakness but decision. As you wish. Celia's smile sharpened. How brave. Not especially, Isolde said. I am merely hungry. For the first time since entering Larkspur House, the Duke almost smiled. The luncheon room glittered with silver, porcelain, and carefully sharpened curiosity. Countess Morley sat beside Lady Harlow, already informed that something extraordinary had occurred but not yet trusted with the full shape of it. The Mrs. Fane, two pale sisters with identical curls and different degrees of malice, watched Isolde as though she had been placed upon the table between the soup and the cut glass. Celia presided at the foot with airy confidence. Sir Percival entered late, kissed his wife's hand, and gave Isolde a look that warned her not to mistake one morning's defiance for victory. The Duke had not been invited, yet he came in behind him with Mr. Bellamy, accepted no apology, and took the chair Lady Harlow offered because refusal would have looked like retreat. His presence ruined Celia's arrangement and improved Isolde's breathing. Cousin, Celia said as the soup was served, Lady Morley was just saying how surprising it is that Lord Avington involved himself so deeply in your future. One might almost think he feared you had none. Celia, Lady Harlow murmured, but without force. Countess Morley tilted her head. My dear, I am sure Lady Celia means that unmarried ladies in reduced circumstances often require careful planning. Careful planning is useful, Isolde said. It becomes less useful when the person being planned for is treated as furniture to be moved. One of the Mrs. Fane choked softly into her napkin. Celia lifted her spoon. Furniture does not usually object to being placed in a better room. No, Isolde said. But women do. The silence was brief and deliciously uncomfortable. Sir Percival set down his glass. You have been encouraged into a very unfortunate tone. I have been encouraged to speak clearly. By His Grace, no doubt. The Duke did not glance up from his plate. Lady Isolde required no instruction from me. That should have been enough to end the matter, but Celia was too wounded to stop. As a maid approached with the tea tray after luncheon, Celia shifted suddenly, catching the girl's elbow with the edge of her sleeve. A cup tipped. Tea splashed across the saucer and onto the linen. The maid went white. Clumsy creature, Celia snapped, with relief so quick it was nearly visible. Look what you've done. The girl dropped into a curtsy so low it shook. I'm sorry, my lady. I didn't mean to. That is evident. Meaning requires intelligence. Isolde rose before she had decided to move. Every face turned toward her. The maid's eyes flicked up, frightened and pleading, then down again. Isolde had worn that same fear too often to leave it unrecognized. Lady Celia's sleeve caught the tray, she said. Celia stared. "I beg your pardon." The maid did not stumble. Your sleeve moved across her arm. Countess Morley's brows lifted. Sir Percival's mouth tightened. The maid stood frozen, as though rescue were another danger she had not been taught to expect. "How attentive you are to servants," Celia said. "How inattentive you are to truth," Isolde replied. The Duke set his knife down with a soft sound. Not loud. Final. No one spoke after that. Celia laughed once, brittle and brief, then waved the maid away. "Go, then. Since Cousin Isolde has made herself your champion." The maid curtsied and fled. Luncheon ended soon after, not because anyone wished it to, but because there are moments when cruelty has been seen too plainly to continue wearing gloves. In the corridor, as Isolde turned toward the stairs, the same maid emerged from a servant's passage, breathless and pale. "My lady." Isolde stopped. "You need not thank me. It isn't that." The girl looked over her shoulder. "I shouldn't say anything." Isolde stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Then say only what you can bear." The maid swallowed. The night Lord Avington died, Sir Percival went to the west corridor room before dawn. He took papers out in a leather case. I saw him because I was carrying ashes down. The house seemed to tilt beneath Isolde's feet. The west corridor room. The one kept locked, my lady. No one uses it. A few steps away, the Duke appeared at the turn of the corridor. He had heard enough. His gaze moved from the maid to Isolde's hand, where the old brass key lay pressed against her glove. Then, he said quietly, "We have found the door he fears." The maid vanished through the servants' passage as soon as footsteps sounded on the stairs, leaving Isolde with the Duke of Harrowmere, the old brass key, and the knowledge that a locked room in the west corridor had suddenly become the center of her life. The corridor smelled faintly of tea, extinguished candles, and rain-damp wool from the coats hanging below. Somewhere behind the walls, Larkspur House resumed its ordinary sounds, as though luncheon had not split open a secret. A footman crossed the hall with his eyes lowered. A door closed too sharply above them. Celia's laugh floated down from the landing, brittle and bright, then disappeared. "We should go to the room now," Isolde said. Her own boldness surprised her. The Duke looked toward the west corridor, then back to her face. "Not yet." A small, familiar disappointment moved through her. "You accepted my conditions this morning." "I did. And one of them was truth. It remained so. Then why wait?" Adrian Vale glanced toward the staircase where Sir Percival might appear at any moment. "Because if we open that door now, in daylight, with half the household alert and your cousin eager for a scene, whatever we find may vanish into confusion before it can become evidence." Isolde hated that he was right. She hated more that rightness could feel like another locked door. "So I am to wait again." The words came sharper than she intended. He heard the wound beneath them, not merely the accusation. "No," he said. "You are to choose the ground on which truth can stand." She looked at him then, truly looked, and saw the restraint in his face. He was not dismissing the key. He was resisting the same impulse she felt, the need to fling open the door and force the house to confess. His control was not passivity. It was preparation. Mr. Bellamy emerged from the luncheon room, his leather case clutched beneath his arm. "Your Grace, Sir Percival has requested that I leave all documents in his keeping until the morning. He may request the moon if it comforts him." Adrian held out his hand. "You will retain the papers yourself." Mr. Bellamy gave a nervous nod. "Of course. And you will send discreetly to your office for any earlier correspondence from Lord Avington." "At once." The solicitor hesitated. "There is another difficulty. Lady Isolde's position in the house is now precarious." The statement struck harder because it was spoken without cruelty. Precarious. A polished legal word for a woman who could be pushed from one room to another until no room admitted her. The Duke's gaze rested on Isolde's torn glove. "I am aware. Sir Percival remains her practical guardian," Mr. Bellamy continued. "He may not command the will, but he can command the household. Her reputation will suffer if rumors spread before the codicil is found." Isolde drew the key into her palm. My reputation appears to have become a table upon which everyone lays their concerns. Forgive me, my lady, Mr. Bellamy said, flushing. I meant protection. Everyone does. The quiet words settled between them. The Duke did not rush to soften them. After a moment, he said, Lady Isolde, there is one means by which Sir Percival's immediate authority over your movements may be checked. She understood before he spoke further, and the understanding chilled her. No, his expression did not change. You have not heard the proposal. If the proposal begins with my name attached to yours before the truth is found, then I have heard enough. Mr. Bellamy looked suddenly fascinated by the brass knob of the nearest door. Adrian lowered his voice. A formal betrothal need not be a marriage. It can be temporary. It can be clearly witnessed as an arrangement pending investigation. It would place you under my protection in the eyes of society without placing you in my possession. Isolde gave a small laugh with no amusement in it. Society is not known for hearing fine distinctions when a woman is involved. No. Which is why the distinction must be made loudly enough. And if I refuse? Then you refuse. She searched his face for impatience, for wounded pride, for the cold male offence she had seen whenever Sir Percival's advice was not obeyed. She found none. That steadied her and frightened her at once. You would let me refuse even if refusal made your investigation harder? Yes. Why? Because a cage does not become honourable because it has a ducal crest on the door. The sentence moved through her with alarming force. For a moment, the corridor, the house, and Mr. Bellamy's embarrassed presence blurred around the edges. Adrian Vale had not promised tenderness. He had promised a door that opened. She held his gaze. What would this betrothal require of me? Public civility. Permission for me to call. Permission for me to prevent Sir Percival from sending you out of London under pretence of rest or propriety. Nothing more. No immediate wedding. No announcement that I accepted the will's condition as written. No assumption that gratitude is affection. A faint shadow touched his mouth. I have not lived so pleasant a life as to confuse the two. Something in that answer hinted at an older wound, quickly covered. Isolde did not pursue it. And if the codicil proves Lord Avington never intended marriage at all, then the betrothal can be dissolved with my name bearing the weight of the explanation. You would invite ridicule. I have been feared too long to be much troubled by ridicule. Feared men can still be proud. Yes. His eyes did not leave hers. That is why I am telling you the cost before asking you to share it. The words were plain. They were also the nearest thing to fairness she had received since Lord Avington died. Behind them, a door opened. Sir Percival stepped into the corridor, his smile already arranged. There you are. Lady Isolde, your aunt requires you. We have all endured sufficient irregularity for one day. You will go upstairs and remain there until I decide how best to answer the unfortunate impressions created this morning. Isolde felt the old command reach for her spine. The habit of obedience was a powerful ghost. The Duke moved only his eyes toward Sir Percival. Lady Isolde is speaking with me. And I am responsible for her. Not entirely. Sir Percival's smile thinned. You presume upon a document no one yet understands. I understand enough to know you fear the missing portion. Your Grace, I must insist that you leave family discipline to family. Isolde heard it then. The trap closing. If she went upstairs, there would be a headache declared, a carriage arranged, perhaps a retreat to some country house where locked rooms could be emptied and servants silenced. A woman did not need chains to disappear. A guardian with a calm voice and a closed carriage could do it cleanly before supper. She looked at the Duke. If I accept a temporary betrothal, can he send me away? Sir Percival's face changed. Isolde. She did not look at him. Adrian answered, not without making an enemy of me in public. And you would be public. Precisely. Her heartbeat became very clear. The key lay warm in her palm. This was not the marriage the will had threatened. It was a shield with terms she had named. It might still cut her. But so would remaining unguarded in Sir Percival's house. Then I accept, she said. Sir Percival gave a short breath, Celia appeared on the stairs above, drawn by instinct to disaster. Lady Harlow followed her, pale and offended. Mr. Bellamy looked as though history had asked him to take notes faster than his hand allowed. The Duke bowed to Isolde, not deeply enough for theatre, but with unmistakable respect. Lady Isolde Wren has agreed to a formal betrothal under investigation, he said. It will be understood that no marriage shall proceed without her free consent and without Lord Avington's true instructions being found. You cannot announce such a thing from my corridor, Sir Percival said. Watch me. Adrian turned to Mr. Bellamy. You will draft the notice in language that cannot be mistaken for surrender. Yes, Your Grace. Celia descended 2 steps, her cheeks bright. How touching. A poor relation becomes almost a duchess before the tea is cold. Isolde felt the remark land. It did not break skin this time. The Duke answered before she could decide whether to spend her strength. Almost is a dangerous word, Lady Celia. It makes people careless around what may soon outrank them. Celia stopped. Sir Percival looked at his daughter sharply, not in defence of Isolde, but in fear of Harrowmere's displeasure. That fear told Isolde more about power than any sermon ever had. Later that afternoon, Mr. Bellamy's carefully worded notice left Larkspur House by trusted messenger. By evening, 3 drawing rooms in Mayfair had heard that Lady Isolde Wren was under the declared protection of the Duke of Harrowmere. By morning, the gossip sheets had made it uglier, as gossip sheets always did. Isolde stood in the breakfast parlour with the paper open before her and read the line everyone in London would soon repeat. The Harrowmere bride, bound by a dead man's will? For a moment, shame rose hot and swift. Then the Duke's hand entered her vision, palm open. In it lay the old brass key, which she had set down beside the paper without noticing. He did not close his fingers over hers. He did not touch her at all. He merely offered back what belonged to her. They may print bound, he said quietly. That doesn't make it true. Isolde took the key from his palm. No, she said, folding the gossip sheet with steady hands. But it means Celia will need a better lie. By the following evening, London had done what London always did with a woman's uncertainty. It had dressed it in satin, seated it beneath chandeliers, and invited witnesses. Countess Whitmore's dinner party was not large enough to be called an event, which made it far more dangerous. In a ballroom, cruelty dispersed itself among music and movement. At a dinner table, it had a knife, a glass, and a fixed audience. Isolde stepped from the Duke's carriage with the old brass key hidden beneath her glove and the gossip sheet's ugly phrase still lodged in memory like a burr. Bound by a dead man's will. She had burned the paper in the grate that morning, but ash did not erase what London had already tasted. Adrian Vale offered his arm at the foot of the steps. He did not bend close. He did not murmur reassurance for the servants to overhear. He merely waited until she chose to place her hand upon his sleeve. That waiting steadied her more than any speech could have done. You are not required to endure insult for my sake, he said as the door opened before them. Nor for mine, she asked. Especially not for yours. She looked up at him. The severe lines of his face did not soften, but something in his eyes held. Then why are we here? Because retreat is useful only when it leads to stronger ground. And this is stronger ground. Countess Whitmore hears everything and repeats only what survives her judgment. The footman announced them before Isolde could answer. Conversation in the drawing-room paused. Not stopped. Paused, which was worse, because it pretended good breeding while every eye measured the distance between her worn dignity and his ducal consequence. Countess Whitmore came forward in silver-grey silk, a small woman with a gaze sharp enough to cut ribbon. She curtsied to the Duke, then turned to Isolde. Lady Isolde Wren. You have given Mayfair something to discuss besides waistcoats and bad marriages. For that alone, I should thank you. Isolde felt Adrian's presence beside her, still and unreadable. I regret troubling the peace of drawing-rooms, my lady. Nonsense. Peace in drawing-rooms is usually only boredom wearing pearls. The Countess's mouth twitched. Come. You shall sit near me. A lesser hostess might have hidden Isolde at the end of the table, close enough to be seen and far enough to be dismissed. Countess Whitmore did not. When dinner was announced, she placed Isolde on her right and the Duke on Isolde's other side. The room noticed. Celia noticed most of all. She sat across from Isolde in pale blue gauze that made her mourning seem suddenly flexible, her smile sweet enough to suggest poison had been sugared. Sir Percival sat farther down the table, conversing with a retired admiral, though his attention returned to Isolde whenever he thought no one watched. The first course passed with remarks about rain, roads, and the Prince Regent's latest extravagance. Isolde answered when spoken to and did not reach for conversation that was not offered. She had learned restraint. Tonight, however, restraint did not feel like disappearance. The Duke did not fill the silence for her. He did something more unsettling. He made space and trusted her to occupy it. Countess Whitmore began the test with the elegance of a woman offering fruit. I understand Lord Avington thought well of your judgment, Lady Isolde. He was generous enough to say so. Generous? Or accurate? Celia lowered her eyes to her soup. Dear cousin has always had a serious mind. It was useful at Larkspur House when accounts needed copying. The Mrs. Fane, seated near the middle, exchanged glances. Sir Percival's mouth tightened into a warning smile. Isolde set down her spoon. Copying accounts teaches one much, Lady Celia. Especially which expenses are treated as necessities and which people are treated as luxuries. A quietness spread around the table. The Duke looked at his glass. Countess Whitmore looked delighted. Indeed, the Countess said. And what would you consider a necessity in the management of a great estate? Celia gave a soft laugh. Surely Lady Isolde has not managed a great estate. No, Isolde said. But I have watched small economies made cruel by vanity. I imagine large estates suffer from the same disease if no one reads the ledgers honestly. Countess Whitmore leaned back. Explain. Isolde felt the room sharpen. This was no longer pity. It was examination. Her pulse quickened, but her mind cleared. Tenants cannot pay rents on land that drains poorly. A household cannot be called well run if servants are dismissed before waste at table is addressed. Parish relief should not depend on whether the giver enjoys being thanked in public. And a duchess, if she is to be useful rather than ornamental, ought to know the difference between charity that repairs dignity and charity that purchases gratitude. No one spoke for 3 seconds. 3 seconds at a dinner table could feel like a lifetime. Then Countess Whitmore placed her wineglass down with quiet approval. How unfashionably sensible. A gentleman near the end of the table coughed into his napkin. The Mrs. Fane stopped smiling. Celia's colour rose. How fortunate His Grace finds household lectures charming. Adrian turned his head at last. I find competence charming only when surrounded by incompetence. Tonight it is indispensable. The words were not warm. They were better. They were public. They placed his rank behind her answer and made mockery expensive. Isolde looked at her plate because the sudden pressure behind her eyes was dangerous. She had been called useful before, but always like a broom in a closet. Never like a mind worth hearing. Sir Percival intervened with a mildness that fooled no one. Lady Isolde has always been observant. It is one of the benefits of a quiet life. A quiet life can reveal much about noisy households, Isolde said. This time, Countess Whitmore smiled openly. My dear, you must visit me again. I have several committees full of ladies who confuse lace purchases with benevolence. You would terrify them into thrift. A ripple of laughter moved around the table, not at Isolde, but with her. The distinction was so unfamiliar that she hardly trusted it. Celia did not laugh. She watched Isolde as though seeing a door open where she had been certain there was a wall. After the final course, the ladies withdrew to the drawing room. Celia approached Isolde near a cabinet of porcelain shepherdesses. You performed beautifully, she said. I hadn't realized desperation could sound so educated. Isolde looked at the little painted figures behind the glass. Each shepherdess smiled forever, fragile and useless. You mistake desperation for memory. I remember what people say when they believe I cannot answer. Celia's fan snapped open. Be careful. His Grace may enjoy novelty tonight, but no duke wants a wife who keeps ledgers in her heart. Then he may choose another. The answer left Isolde before fear could soften it. Celia stared. You would risk that? I have been risked by everyone else long enough. I may as well begin doing it myself. Across the room, Countess Whitmore was watching. So was the Duke from the threshold, where the gentleman had rejoined the ladies sooner than expected. He had heard. Isolde knew it from the stillness of his face. She expected correction, perhaps concerned that she had spoken too plainly. Instead, he crossed the room and offered his arm. Lady Isolde, the carriage is ready. Celia's smile sharpened. Leaving so soon? Before the room grows less intelligent, Adrian said. Countess Whitmore laughed once, softly, and the sound sealed the evening's verdict. In the carriage, London rolled past in wet black streets and blurred lamplight. Isolde sat with her hands folded, the old key resting against her pulse. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The silence was not empty. It was full of everything that had nearly been said. At last, Adrian said, "You did not survive them tonight." She turned toward him. "I beg your pardon." "You surpassed them." The word struck with such quiet force that she had to look away. Praise made to flatter could be refused. Praise made from observation found the places one had hidden even from oneself. "I only answered questions." "No. You let them see the mind they try to reduce to gratitude." Rain tapped against the carriage roof. Isolde watched a lamp flare and vanish past the window. "I am not accustomed to being seen kindly." "I did not say kindly." His voice lowered. "I said accurately." Her breath caught. It was a small thing, no more than a sentence spoken in a dark carriage with proper distance between them. Yet it felt more intimate than any compliment. Kindness could pity. Accuracy could honor. Back at Larkspur House, Celia stood alone in the small withdrawing room, the applause of the evening still absent from her ears. A footman entered with a folded envelope on a tray. No seal. No name. Only her hand reaching too quickly. She opened it beside the candle and read the line written inside. "If Harrowmere sees this, he will cast her off himself." Celia looked toward the staircase where Isolde had gone, then slowly smiled. The musical evening at Lady Morley's house was arranged like a trap that wished to be admired for its taste. Candles burned in tall branches beside the pianoforte. Pale gowns gathered beneath painted ceilings. A harp stood near the far wall, its strings catching the light like threads of gold, and every chair had been placed with that careful social malice which allowed certain women to be observed without seeming displayed. Isolde felt it the moment she entered on the Duke's arm. The room knew. Not the truth, not yet, but enough rumor to make truth unnecessary. Faces turned and softened into smiles too quickly. Fans lifted. Whispers tucked themselves behind lace. Somewhere near the windows, Celia stood in lavender silk, looking delicate, wounded, and far too satisfied. Adrian Vale paused at the threshold long enough for the room to remember his rank. Then he looked down at Isolde. "You may leave whenever you wish." "That would please too many people," she said. His mouth did not smile, but his eyes changed by a fraction. "Then we remain." Lady Morley greeted them with nervous eagerness, curtsying so low that her pearls trembled. Countess Whitmore was already present, seated near the front with an expression of sharp boredom that gave Isolde more comfort than kindness would have done. Sir Percival stood beside the mantel, speaking with two gentlemen whose attention kept drifting toward the Duke. He wore sorrow beautifully tonight. It lay upon his face like black crepe arranged by an expert hand. "Lady Isolde," he said when she passed near him, "I hope the excitement of recent days has not fatigued you. Ambition can be a fever in a young woman unaccustomed to consequence." Adrian's hand stilled over the head of his cane. Isolde felt the movement rather than saw it. She answered before he could. "Then I am fortunate, Sir Percival, that consequence has found me after many years of practice in endurance." Countess Whitmore's fan paused mid-air. Sir Percival's smile thinned. "Endurance is admirable when paired with humility. So is authority," Isolde said, "when paired with honesty." A note struck from the pianoforte before he could reply. Conversation settled into the hush expected of cultivated people pretending to listen. Isolde took the chair Lady Morley had assigned her, not hidden, not honored, but placed where anyone entering the room would see her profile. Adrian stood behind her for a moment, then moved to the side wall, close enough that his presence was not protective theatre but quiet fact. The first song began. A soprano sang of parting beneath moonlight. Isolde tried to attend, but her attention kept returning to Celia. Her cousin had not approached since their arrival. That, more than insult, warned her. Celia enjoyed proximity when she meant to wound. Tonight she waited. During the second piece, a servant carried a silver tray with folded programs and stray sheets of music. Celia moved toward him as though searching for her own program. Her shoulder turned. A paper slipped. It fell near Isolde's chair, white against the dark carpet. Such a small thing. Such an innocent fall. Isolde looked down, and before she could move, Miss Fane bent with a little cry. "Oh, Lady Isolde, I believe you dropped something." "I did not." Miss Fane had already opened it. Her eyes widened with the practiced horror of a woman rewarded for discovering what she had been meant to find. Good heavens! The music faltered. The soprano missed half a note and recovered too late. "What is it?" Lady Morley asked, though her voice suggested she would rather the paper vanish. Miss Fane looked toward Celia. Celia pressed a hand to her throat. Perhaps it should not be read aloud. That settled it. Every soul in the room wished to hear it. Sir Percival crossed from the mantel with dreadful reluctance. "If this concerns my ward, I must see it." Adrian moved at the same time, but Sir Percival reached the paper first because Miss Fane turned toward him as if guided by fear. He read. The sorrow on his face deepened into something nearly paternal. "No," he said softly. "I had hoped even now that I was mistaken." Isolde rose. "What is that letter?" Sir Percival did not hand it to her. He held it as though it had wounded him. "You know very well." A murmur went through the room. Adrian's voice cut through it. "Give me the paper." Sir Percival hesitated. A dangerous choice. Then, because he stood before a duke and too many witnesses, he passed it over. Adrian read in silence. Isolde watched his face. It did not change. That was the first fear. He read once, then again. That was the second. Celia whispered, "Is it her hand?" Miss Fane said, "It looks very like it." Sir Percival closed his eyes briefly. The letter suggests Lady Isolde understood the will's condition before the reading. It suggests she intended to secure his Grace's attachment through appearance of reluctance. Lady Morley made a faint sound. "Surely not." "It is written," Miss Fane said. Countess Whitmore's voice was dry. "Many false things have enjoyed ink." Isolde looked at Adrian. "May I see it?" He gave her the paper at once. Their fingers did not touch. The letter shook only slightly in her hand, which felt like a victory no one else could see. The words were ugly because they were clever. Not wild. Not foolish. Written in a hand close enough to hers to make denial sound desperate. "I need only appear unwilling." Men of pride prefer to believe they are rescuing what others failed to value. Once Harrowmere declares himself, neither Sir Percival nor London can undo it. The room blurred for one breath. Not from tears. From the sudden, precise knowledge that someone had studied her enough to counterfeit not only her hand but her humiliation. "I did not write this," she said. The sentence was simple. In a just room, it would have mattered. This was not a just room. Sir Percival spoke gently, and gentleness became the cruelest instrument in the room. "My dear child, no one wishes to condemn you. But you have been under strain. Lord Avington's will, his Grace's attention, the sudden prospect of rank. Vanity can take hold of even a modest heart when opportunity appears." "Don't pretend pity is proof," Isolde said. A few women inhaled. Celia lowered her eyes, but not before Isolde saw the flash of triumph. Adrian still had not spoken. He held the letter again now, his gaze fixed on the lower line. His silence lengthened. It became visible. It became weight. Isolde understood with a sick clarity that everyone was not waiting for her denial. They were waiting for his belief. At last he said, "The slant is wrong in 3 places." Relief nearly reached her. Then he continued. The paper is from Avington's old study stock. The ink is recent. Then it is false, Isolde said. It appears false. Appears. The word landed harder than accusation. Adrian's jaw tightened, and for the first time since she had known him, something old and ungoverned moved behind his eyes. Not suspicion alone. Memory. Pain with a locked door around it. Your Grace, Sir Percival said softly, a man of your experience knows that forged documents can also be used to claim innocence. We must not rush because we wish the truth more pleasant. Isolde watched Adrian's hand close around the paper. He looked at her then, and she saw the battle in him. He wanted fact before judgment. She knew that. She even understood it. But the room did not understand caution. The room understood hesitation from a powerful man as permission to doubt a powerless woman. I will keep this as evidence, Adrian said. No conclusion will be drawn tonight. No conclusion. Around them, whispers bloomed. No conclusion sounded like mercy. It felt like exile. Isolde folded her hands before her so no one would see how the torn glove had begun to tremble. How generous, Celia murmured. The Duke's head turned. Take care, Lady Celia. She lowered her lashes. I'm only relieved His Grace is so measured. Measured, Countess Whitmore said, is not always the same as wise. That was the only kindness that reached Isolde, and even that could not undo the space opening between her and Adrian. Lady Morley began insisting the music resume. Chairs shifted. The soprano returned to the pianoforte with a face like chalk. Sir Percival's sorrowful expression remained perfect. Celia's fingers touched the lace at her wrist, where no ink would ever stain her. Isolde turned to the Duke. May I have my carriage called? His eyes sharpened. I will take you back to Larkspur House. Thank you, but I am still permitted to request a carriage without being carried. The sentence struck him. She saw it. Good. Let something strike him. Lady Isolde, he said quietly, I do not believe you wrote it. No, she replied. You merely allowed the room time to decide you might. Silence passed between them, more intimate and more painful than touch. His face altered, not dramatically, but enough. A man who had been feared across London discovered, in that instant, that restraint could wound as surely as accusation. Isolde turned away before compassion could weaken her. In the hall, a footman hurried for her wrap. The old brass key lay against her wrist beneath the glove, hidden but real. When Adrian followed, she did not look back. I shall find the truth, she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. And this time, I will not ask anyone's permission to be believed. Behind her, the music began again, thin and trembling. Ahead of her, the front door opened to the night. The carriage ride back to Larkspur House was quieter than the musical evening had been, and far more merciless. London slid past the dark windows in streaks of lamplight and wet stone. Isolde sat with her hands folded over the old brass key, feeling each turn of the wheels carry her away from one public room and toward another kind of judgment. Adrian Vale sat opposite her, the forged letter inside his coat, his face carved into the same control that had first made the world fear him. It had once steadied her. Tonight it had betrayed her. I should have answered sooner, he said at last. The confession did not come wrapped in excuse. That made it harder to dismiss. Isolde looked at the black pane beside her, where her reflection appeared pale and composed, like a woman painted after the feeling had been scraped out. Yes. His hand tightened on the head of his cane. I saw the errors in the hand. I saw them at once. Then the room so you consider whether the errors were enough. I needed the paper secured before Percival could destroy or replace it. And I needed one person in that room to know I was not a thief of pity. He drew a breath, slow and controlled. I do know it. After thought. The wheel struck a rut. The carriage rocked, then settled. For one foolish second, she remembered the night before, when he had said she had surpassed them. She had carried those words like warmth beneath her gloves. Now they felt like something she had been foolish to trust too quickly. Lady Isolde, he said, and the restraint in his voice had begun to fracture at the edges, I have seen forged letters ruin a life because I believed what I wished to believe. She turned from the window. Whose life? Silence answered first. Then he said, "My brothers." It was not offered for sympathy. It was a door opened 1 inch. She saw the cost of it. She also saw the danger. Pain, in powerful men, was too often made into law for everyone near them. "I am sorry," she said. "Truly. But your wound cannot become the scale on which my honesty is weighed." The words landed between them and did not move. Adrian's gaze held hers, dark and stricken behind discipline. "No," he said. "It cannot." The carriage stopped before Larkspur House. The footman opened the door. Isolde descended without taking the Duke's hand, not from cruelty, but because she needed to know her own balance still belonged to her. Inside, the hall was lit too brightly. Sir Percival waited near the stairs, as if grief and authority had appointed him doorkeeper. Celia stood above him on the first landing in a white shawl, beautiful as innocence and twice as false. "My dear," Sir Percival said, "you must be exhausted. I have given orders that you are not to be troubled tonight." "How considerate," Isolde said. "It is more than consideration. It is necessity. After this evening's unfortunate display, you require rest and privacy." "Privacy," Adrian repeated from behind her. Sir Percival bowed slightly. "Your Grace, I trust you will agree that Lady Isolde's continued exposure to public speculation is unwise." Celia descended 2 steps. "People can be so cruel. They're already saying she should be removed from London until her nerves recover." Isolde looked up at her. "Are they? How swift of them." Celia's lashes lowered. "Don't blame me for what everyone saw." Adrian's voice cut in. What everyone saw was a document of doubtful origin introduced with remarkable convenience. Sir Percival sighed, deeply wounded by reason. "And yet, Your Grace, even doubtful documents do harm. That is why I have written to suggest Lady Isolde spend a few weeks in the country. Quiet air. No gossip. No further strain." Isolde understood then that the forged letter had never been meant to convince everyone forever. It only needed to make removal sound merciful. Once she left London, the West Corridor room could be emptied. The maid could be dismissed. The codicil, if it remained, could disappear into fire, water, or some locked drawer in a house where her voice did not carry. Adrian understood at the same moment. "She will not be sent away by you." Sir Percival's smile cooled. "Then by whom?" "You?" The challenge hung there, bait-wrapped in courtesy. Adrian turned to Isolde. "Harrowmere Hall is secure. My housekeeper is respectable. My aunt is in residence. You would have protection, distance from scandal, and time while I prove the letter false." The words were careful. Sensible. Deadly. Isolde stared at him. "You wish me to leave London. I wish you safe while I find proof." "Safe," she repeated. The word had never sounded more like a curtain drawn across a window. "Out of sight. No, away from witnesses. Away from those who mean to injure you. Those are the same people who will say you have hidden me because you are ashamed to stand beside me." Celia gave the smallest breath of satisfaction. Sir Percival said softly, "Lady Isolde, do not mistake help for insult." She did not look at him. Her eyes remained on the Duke. "I have spent my life waiting for men to find it convenient to believe me." Adrian went very still. "That is not what I am asking. It is what they will hear. Let them hear wrong until I can make them hear truth." No, the word was quiet, but it turned every face toward her. She felt the key under her glove, hard and warm and certain. "No, Your Grace. You do not repair a public wound by carrying me into a private room and promising to return with bandages." Something in his face changed. Too late. The realization arrived, but not before the injury. Lady Harlow appeared at the drawing-room door, pale and anxious. "Perhaps a little rest would be best, Isolde." "Rest has been recommended to women for centuries when others wished them silent," Isolde said. Sir Percival's eyes hardened. "Enough. You are overwrought." Adrian turned on him, and the hall seemed to lose several degrees of warmth. "Call her that again, and you will discover how little patience I have for men who name courage as hysteria." Sir Percival's mouth closed. It should have felt like victory. It did not. Isolde was tired of being defended after the terms of her dismissal had already been spoken aloud. "I will retire," she said. "Not because I am commanded. Because I choose to end this conversation before it makes cowards of us all." She passed them and went up the stairs without waiting for permission. In her chamber, the fire had been lit too high, as though heat could smother thought. Her small trunk stood open near the bed. Someone had already begun folding garments into it. That simple fact stopped her more effectively than shouting. They had expected her removal. Perhaps before she even returned from Lady Morley's. Perhaps before the letter fell. On the pillow lay a visiting card written in a shaking hand. Mrs. Agnes Pember, the elderly companion who had once served Lord Avington's sister, waited in the little sitting room adjoining the bedchamber. She rose with effort when Isolde entered. "My lady, I came as soon as I heard. Lord Avington was good to me. If you need a respectable roof tonight, mine is humble, but it has a lock no Harlow commands." Isolde looked at the trunk, then at the woman's lined face. "I cannot run." "No, my lady." Mrs. Pember's eyes moved to the blue ribbon at Isolde's wrist. "But you may step where they did not expect." By the hour before midnight, Larkspur House had quieted into the false peace of houses that believe their secrets asleep. Sir Percival had retired. Celia's door had closed. The Duke had left after one final, restrained message sent through Mr. Bellamy, asking Isolde not to act alone. She read it twice, then folded it away. He still did not understand. Alone was what she had been trained for. With Mrs. Pember as witness and shield, Isolde left by the side passage used for quiet departures and rode only as far as the end of the square. There, under cover of darkness and a veil drawn low, she returned on foot through the servants' entrance the maid had described, the brass key cold in her gloved hand. The west corridor stretched ahead, unlit except for the candle Mrs. Pember held behind her. At the far end stood the narrow door no one used. Isolde placed the key into the lock and heard, for the first time in years, the small metallic click of something deciding to open. The door opened as though it had been holding its breath for years. Isolde stood on the threshold with the old brass key still caught in the lock, and for one moment she could not enter. The little room behind the west corridor was not grand enough to justify secrecy. That made it worse. It held no jewels, no portrait gallery, no dramatic chest beneath velvet. It held dust, a narrow writing desk, 3 covered shelves, and the faint stale scent of paper left too long without air. Mrs. Pember lifted the candle higher, and the flame showed a room carefully abandoned rather than forgotten. A chair stood angled away from the desk, as though someone had risen in haste. The curtains were drawn tight. A thin line of soot marked the hearth, though no fire had been laid in months. "My lady," Mrs. Pember whispered, "we should be quick." Isolde stepped inside. The floorboards gave one soft complaint beneath her shoe. Every instinct told her that entering this room changed something that could not be returned to its former shape. Good. Former shapes had not served her. She crossed to the desk and touched the first drawer. Locked. The second opened with a sigh, empty except for sealing wax flakes and a broken quill. The third resisted. She tried the brass key. It turned. Inside lay a leather ledger, 2 bundles of letters tied with black ribbon, and a small frame wrapped in linen. Isolde reached for the frame first, though she did not know why. When she unfolded the cloth, the candlelight revealed her mother's face. Younger than Isolde remembered. Softer. Her painted eyes held an expression so familiar that pain moved through Isolde before recognition could name it. Her mother had worn that look whenever she had smiled through worry because a child was watching. Mrs. Pember drew a breath. Lady Margaret Wren. Isolde held the frame carefully. You knew her? Only a little. Lord Avington kept that portrait after your father died. He said some promises belong to the living until the dead are properly defended. Isolde set the portrait beside the candle, not too close. Her hands were steady now. Grief could wait. Truth could not. She opened the ledger. The first pages were ordinary estate accounts written in Lord Avington's hand. Then the columns changed. Names. Dates. Sums transferred. Trust income marked for Lady Isolde Wren. Payments diverted through Harlow accounts. Loans concealed beneath household expenses. Sir Percival's signature appeared at the bottom of one page, elegant at first, then less so as debts grew bolder. Isolde felt the room narrow. For years she had accepted turned gowns, cold economies, and lectures on gratitude while money meant for her had crossed the table under another man's hand. He stole it, Mrs. Pember said, and her voice shook with age and anger. Not all at once, Isolde replied. That would have looked vulgar. The quietness of her own voice startled her. Rage did not always arrive as flame. Sometimes it arrived as clarity. She took the first bundle of letters and untied the black ribbon. Lord Avington's handwriting filled the top page, weak but deliberate. To His Grace, the Duke of Harrowmere. If this reaches you, then I have failed to protect the girl by ordinary means. Girl. The word should have made her feel small. Instead, it broke her. Not because it diminished her, but because it remembered her before Larkspur House had trained her to become useful and quiet. She read on. I do not ask you to take possession of Lady Isolde Wren. I ask you to stand as trustee and protector until her independent settlement is secured. She must not be married by pressure, gratitude, fear, or debt. If affection comes, let it come after freedom. If it does not, let freedom suffice. Isolde pressed the heel of her hand to her mouth. Mrs. Pember turned away with dignity, pretending not to see. The will had not bound her. Men had. Men with keys to doors, access to papers, and smooth voices that made theft sound like care. Beneath the letter lay the codicil copy. It was not long. That surprised her. A life could be restored in fewer words than it took to ruin one. The codicil confirmed an independent settlement, an annuity, and the right to choose residence outside Sir Percival's household. It named the Duke not as owner, not as husband by expectation, but as temporary trustee should Lord Avington die before the arrangement was completed. In a lower paragraph, clear as daylight, were the words that made her grip the page until it trembled. No marriage shall be required, inferred, or advanced unless Lady Isolde Wren gives free consent after full disclosure of her situation. Free consent, she whispered. The phrase entered the room like fresh air. Mrs. Pember touched the back of a chair. Then the packet they read was false. Not entirely false, Isolde said. Her eyes moved over the documents. Worse. It was rearranged. Enough truth to make a lie respectable. A sound came from the corridor. Not loud. A soft scrape, like silk against the door frame. Mrs. Pember turned. Isolde gathered the ledger and codicil against her chest just as Celia stepped into the room. Her cousin wore no shawl now, only a pale wrapper hastily tied, and fury had stripped every sweetness from her face. How industrious, Celia said. One scandal was not sufficient? You must add burglary. The key was mine. Nothing in this house is yours. Celia's eyes dropped to the ledger. Fear flashed there, bright and ugly. Give me those papers. No, you don't even know what they mean. I know precisely what they mean. Celia moved toward her. Mrs. Pember stepped between them, small and trembling but immovable. Lady Celia, you will not touch her. Out of my way, old woman. No, Isolde said. The word stopped them both. She had said it before in drawing rooms, corridors, and carriages. Here, among the stolen years, it sounded different. It sounded final. Celia's hand shot toward the ledger. Isolde turned aside, and Celia caught only the edge of the black ribbon. The candle wavered as Mrs. Pember stumbled back against the desk. Wax spilled onto the blotter. Flame leaned toward a loose sheet. For one suspended instant, every truth in the room balanced on a thread of fire. Isolde set the ledger beneath her arm and struck the paper away from the flame with her gloved hand. The edge browned but did not catch. Celia gasped, more frightened for the documents than for anyone near them. That told Isolde enough. You knew, Isolde said. Celia stepped back. I knew nothing. You knew he feared this room. Everyone fears inconvenience when poor relations grow dramatic. Then why come alone? Celia's lips parted. No answer came. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Firm, swift, unmistakable. The Duke appeared at the doorway with no hat, his coat unbuttoned, rain still dark on the hem as though he had come directly from the street. Behind him stood Mr. Bellamy, breathless, carrying a leather case. Adrian took in the room in one glance. The open drawer. The portrait. The candle. Celia's face. Isolde's hand locked around the ledger and codicil. His expression changed when he saw the scorched edge of the paper at her feet. Not loudly. Not violently. Something far more controlled moved through him. "Lady Celia," he said, "step away from Lady Isolde." Celia obeyed before she could decide not to. Isolde might have admired the power of that voice if she had not been too full of her own. Adrian crossed to her, then stopped at the proper distance. He did not reach for the papers. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Are those the documents?" "Yes." Mr. Bellamy came forward, eyes widening as he saw the codicil. "Good Lord." The Duke looked at Isolde, and this time there was no hesitation in him. Only apology, held back because apology was not yet enough. "You found it." "I opened the door," she said. Her voice shook now, but not from fear. "Lord Avington did not command me to marry you. He asked you to protect my freedom." Sir Percival buried that and made the protection look like possession. Adrian's jaw tightened. "Then we will expose him." He extended one hand, palm open. "May I secure the papers?" Isolde looked at his hand. Last night, she might have given them to him out of relief. Tonight, she understood the difference between trust and surrender. She held the ledger closer. "No." Mrs. Pember made a small sound. Mr. Bellamy froze. Celia stared as if Isolde had lost all sense. The Duke did not withdraw his hand in anger. He lowered it slowly. Isolde met his eyes. "This truth is mine to carry." The words filled the cramped little room. Adrian Vale bowed his head once, accepting correction like a man accepting judgment. "Then carry it," he said. "And I will stand where anyone who tries to take it from you must pass through me first." Before Isolde could answer, the hall below erupted in voices. A footman hurried to the west corridor, pale with alarm. "Your Grace." "My lady." "Sir Percival has sent for the family witnesses. He says there will be a final statement in the drawing-room at 9 tomorrow morning regarding Lady Isolde's conduct." Celia's face changed. Too much fear. Too late. Isolde looked down at the ledger in her arms, then at her mother's portrait on the desk. The room had opened. The truth had breath. "Then," she said, "tomorrow he shall have won." By the time the scorched paper, the ledger, the codicil, Lord Avington's letter, and Lady Margaret Wren's small portrait had been carried from the west corridor room, Larkspur House had lost the pretense of sleep. Doors opened and closed with cautious speed. Servants moved like shadows that had learned not to listen while hearing everything. Sir Percival remained below, issuing instructions in a voice too calm to be innocent. Celia had vanished to her chamber with the white face of a woman who had discovered that malice, once written down, could be answered in ink. Isolde sat in the morning room because it had an open door, a clear line of sight to the corridor, and Mrs. Pember placed in a chair near the hearth with the dignity of a chaperone who understood that propriety could be both shield and witness. Mr. Bellamy had gone to send for Lord Avington's former clerk, a man who, if living memory proved merciful, might verify the codicil before 9 o'clock. The Duke stood at the far side of the table, not touching the papers. That restraint mattered. Isolde noticed because she noticed everything now. He had placed 2 candles nearer the documents, not nearer himself, so the evidence could be seen without his shadow falling across it. "Your Grace," Mrs. Pember said, folding her gloved hands, "I am old enough to doze with my eyes open. I shall remain precisely here." Adrian inclined his head. "Your presence honors the room, Mrs. Pember." The old woman looked startled, then pleased despite herself. Isolde almost smiled, but the ache inside her was too full. She rested one hand upon the ledger and the other near the key. "You said you had lost your brother because of a forged letter." The Duke's eyes lifted. He had expected questions about strategy, solicitors, or Sir Percival. Not this. "Yes. Tell me only what I need to understand. That may be less than I owe you." The words were quiet. They did not ask for forgiveness. She waited. He turned the silver head of his cane once beneath his palm, the only sign of discomfort. My younger brother, Edmund, was accused of selling family correspondence for gambling debts. A letter bearing his hand was shown to me. I believed it because I had already feared his recklessness. I did not strike him. I did not denounce him publicly. I did something cleaner and more cowardly. His mouth tightened. I withheld trust until proof could be found. Isolde looked down at the codicil, where Lord Avington's protection had nearly died in a locked room. And what happened? He left England before I found the truth. By the time I learned the letter had been forged by a man who owed him money, Edmund had taken a fever abroad. He returned alive, but never well. He died within the year. The room held the confession without softening it. Rain moved against the windows. Mrs. Pember lowered her eyes. Isolde felt sorrow for the Duke, sharp and genuine, but it did not erase the pain of Lady Morley's room, the pause, the waiting faces, the word appears settling over her innocence like dust. "I am sorry," she said. "I believe you are." His voice roughened slightly. "But sorrow is not reparation." She looked at him then. "No. It is not." He accepted the answer as if he had deserved a harsher one. That, more than any speech, made her anger tremble. She did not want him broken. She wanted him honest. "When you saw that letter," she said, "you saw your brother." "Yes. And everyone else saw me." He closed his eyes briefly. "Yes. That is the harm, Your Grace." Pain explains hesitation. It does not make it harmless. The sentence struck him with visible force. He did not defend himself. He did not reach for the excuse she had already named and refused. "You are right." Isolde had imagined, in some small hardened corner of herself, that hearing him admit it would feel like victory. It did not. It felt like a door opening onto a room neither of them wished to enter, but both must. "Tomorrow," he said, "Sir Percival intends to stand in the drawing-room and make your judgment the subject before he is made the accused. He will speak of nerves, ambition, gratitude, and feminine instability. He will invite others to pity you until pity begins to look like doubt. Then I must speak before he finishes building the cage." "Yes." He reached into his coat and drew out the forged letter from Lady Morley's musical evening. He placed it on the table beside the true codicil. "This is yours to answer." Isolde looked at the ugly, careful imitation of her hand. "I would rather burn it." "So would I." His gaze was steady. "But if we burn every lie, we sometimes lose the chance to show who lit it." The reasoning was sound. She hated that. She hated also that he had said "we," then left the paper untouched until she decided. "Mr. Bellamy may hold the codicil," she said after a moment. "Mrs. Pember may testify that I opened the drawer. The maid can speak if she is not too frightened. I will not force a servant into the center of a family scandal if it endangers her place." The answer came so quickly that Isolde looked up. Adrian added, "Her statement can be taken privately by Bellamy and supported by my protection if Sir Percival attempts dismissal." "You thought of that? You taught me to look below the level at which gentlemen usually aim their concern." There it was again, that accuracy. Not flattery. Recognition with consequence. Isolde's fingers touched the torn edge of her glove, repaired in haste but still visibly weaker at the seam. "Tomorrow I will not stand behind you. No, I will not enter as your rescued bride. No, and if you correct Sir Percival, you will correct first what happened at Lady Morley's." He bowed his head once. Before every witness. A silence followed. It was gentler than the ones before it, but no less charged. Isolde felt how close they stood in purpose while still separated by injury. She understood, with painful clarity, that affection had begun somewhere behind her defenses long before she had permitted it a name. It had begun when he placed a torn scrap of glove on a silver salver as evidence. It had deepened when he returned the key with an open palm. It had nearly broken when he hesitated before the forged letter. Now it stood before her, not healed, not safe, but possible. Adrian moved around the table slowly, stopping well beyond impropriety. Mrs. Pember remained by the hearth, eyes open now, needle still and vigilant. Lady Isolde, he said, I will not ask for forgiveness tonight. Good. The smallest shadow of a smile moved across his mouth and disappeared. I will not ask you to choose me tomorrow because truth has made me convenient. Better. I will expose Sir Percival if you refuse me, if you despise me, if you leave England, or if you marry a vicar in Devon with better manners and fewer enemies. In spite of everything, a breath of laughter escaped her. It was brief, fragile, and real. A vicar in Devon? I am told they exist. With better manners. Almost certainly. The absurdity loosened something in the room. Not the stakes. Not the pain. Only the grip around her ribs. Then his face grew serious again. Tomorrow, I will do what I should have done the moment that letter touched the air. I will stand beside the truth before asking the truth to stand beside me. Isolde looked at him for a long moment. Then she removed the repaired glove from her right hand and laid it over the ledger. His eyes followed the movement, but he did not move nearer. She picked up the glove again and held it out, not to be taken, but to be seen. This is not a favor, she said. It is not a token. No, it is a reminder. If you forget that public silence can tear what private apologies cannot mend, look at the seam. His face changed. The feared Duke of Harrowmere looked, for one unguarded moment, not fearsome at all, but pierced by the dignity of being trusted with a warning instead of a wound. He accepted the edge of the glove between two fingers and bowed over it. His lips touched only the mended seam, through cloth, with Mrs. Pember present and the door open. It was not passion. It was not possession. It was reverence disciplined into propriety. Isolde felt it through the room rather than through her skin. I will remember, he said. Before dawn, Mr. Bellamy returned with word that Lord Avington's former clerk had been found and would appear at 9. Isolde rose from the table with the ledger in her arms and the brass key tied once more at her wrist. At 9, the same drawing-room that had read her like a clause would be filled again. This time, she would not stand near the window. At 9 o'clock, the drawing-room of Larkspur House filled with the same careful furniture, the same pale walls, and the same gilded mirrors that had watched Isolde stand near the window and learn how easily a woman could be turned into an arrangement. This morning, she did not stand by the window. She entered with the ledger in her arms, the true codicil beneath it, Lord Avington's letter folded inside the cover, and the old brass key tied at her wrist on its faded blue ribbon. Mrs. Pember came behind her, small and upright. Mr. Bellamy stood near the writing table with a second man beside him, Lord Avington's former clerk, Mr. Knott, whose thin face and ink-stained fingers had the anxious dignity of someone who knew the value of a document because he had spent his life making other men's wishes legible. Countess Whitmore had come as well, seated with her cane across her lap and a gaze that made several lesser relatives regret having accepted Sir Percival's invitation. Sir Percival stood before the hearth as though it were a pulpit. Celia sat beside her mother in pale grey, her hands folded too tightly. Adrian Vale, Duke of Harrowmere, stood at the end of the room, not beside Isolde yet, not before her, but where every man in the room would have to look past him before reaching her. Sir Percival began before anyone could rearrange the air. I regret the necessity of this gathering. It pains me to speak of a young lady entrusted to my care in such terms, but affection must not blind judgment. Lady Isolde has lately shown herself governed by ambition, nerves, and a most dangerous susceptibility to flattery. The letter revealed last night cannot be ignored. He lifted the forged letter with the sorrow of a man displaying evidence at a funeral. It suggests deliberate manipulation. It suggests she used Lord Avington's eccentric wishes and his Grace's honourable impulses to raise herself beyond her proper expectation. Celia lowered her eyes at just the right moment. Lady Harlow sniffed into a handkerchief. Isolde felt the old shame reach for her, but it found no empty place to grip. She laid the brass key on the table. The small sound of metal on polished wood cut through the room. Before Sir Percival finishes arranging my character for burial, she said, I ask that the true documents be read. Sir Percival's smile did not move. My dear, this is exactly the agitation I feared. Adrian's voice entered then, cold and exact. Call courage agitation again, and you will answer to me before you answer to counsel. The silence changed. Sir Percival's colour altered by a shade. Isolde did not look at the Duke. If she did, she might lean upon his strength before using her own. She opened the ledger. This book records funds set aside for me by Lord Avington. It also records transfers through Harlow accounts signed by Sir Percival over several years. Household reimbursements, Sir Percival said. Necessary management. Mr. Bellamy stepped forward. Not as entered here. The sums correspond to trust income, not household expense. Mr. Knott cleared his throat. I copied several of Lord Avington's instructions before his death. This ledger is in his hand at the beginning. The later notations are not. Isolde lifted the codicil. This was found last night in the West Corridor room, locked in a drawer opened by the key Lord Avington gave me years ago. Celia's head snapped up. Found by you after midnight. How convenient. With Mrs. Pember as witness, Isolde said. The elderly woman lifted her chin. I witnessed it. I also saw Lady Celia enter and attempt to seize the papers. Celia stood. That's a lie. Countess Whitmore's cane tapped once upon the floor. Sit down, child. You are not accomplished enough to be convincing. Celia Saturday. Her face burned. Mr. Bellamy took the codicil and read the essential lines aloud. No marriage shall be required, inferred, or advanced unless Lady Isolde Wren gives free consent after full disclosure of her situation. The words moved through the drawing-room slowly, stripping the first wool packet of its power. Isolde felt them settle in her bones. Free consent. Full disclosure. Her life had not been promised away. It had been hidden. Mr. Knott then confirmed that the codicil matched the copy he had prepared under Lord Avington's instruction. It was to be delivered with a letter to his Grace, he said. Lord Avington feared Sir Percival might prevent the settlement if he learned its full terms. Adrian placed the original letter on the table. That letter was interfered with before it reached me. I did not receive it. Sir Percival's composure strained at last. This is supposition built upon resentment. No, Isolde said. She lifted the forged letter from Lady Morley's musical evening. This is resentment dressed as my hand. It used paper from Lord Avington's old study. It appeared precisely when Celia needed a scandal and Sir Percival needed my removal from London. Celia whispered, You can't prove I wrote it. I did not say you wrote it, Isolde said. I said you used it. The distinction landed. Celia looked toward her father before she could stop herself. It was enough. Not legally enough, perhaps, but socially it struck like a bell. Adrian stepped forward then, but not to take the papers. He addressed the room. Last night, when this forged letter appeared, I saw errors in the hand. I saw enough to doubt it. Yet I spoke too cautiously. I allowed the room time to wonder whether Lady Isolde's innocence required further permission from me. He turned to her, and before every witness, the feared Duke bowed his head. That was my failure. My history gave me caution. It did not give me the right to make you stand alone while others weighed your honor. Isolde's throat tightened. The apology was not private. It had not waited for safety. It did what apologies too often feared to do. It cost him something in public. Sir Percival tried to seize the room back. A touching performance, Your Grace, but noble guilt does not alter financial interpretation. Counsel will enjoy your interpretation, Adrian said. Mr. Bellamy has already prepared copies. The matter will go before proper legal authority, including inquiry into forgery, suppression of a codicil, and misappropriation of trust funds. Until then, you are removed from any claim of stewardship over Lady Isolde's affairs. Sir Percival went white with fury. You cannot cut me in my own house. Countess Whitmore rose with slow precision. No, Sir Percival. Society will do that for him. She turned her gaze to Lady Harlow. My invitations will not include this household while this matter remains unresolved. I suspect I shall not be lonely in that decision. A murmur followed, then silence as the relatives understood where safety now lay. Not with Sir Percival. Not with Celia. With truth, because the Duke had placed his rank beside it and Isolde had placed her voice within it. Celia began to cry, delicately at first, then with less control when no one hurried to comfort her. I didn't know father had taken anything, she said. I only wanted her to stop looking as if she were better than us. Isolde looked at her cousin and felt no triumph. Only exhaustion and a final severing of the old desire to be accepted by people who had needed her small in order to feel secure. I was never better than you, she said. I was only less cruel. Adrian reached into his coat and drew out the small torn scrap of glove he had placed aside on the first morning. He set it beside the key. This was the first evidence I understood, he said. Not of fraud. Of habit. A room full of people watched a lady's dignity torn and expected her to apologize for the thread. No one answered. They could not. Isolde touched the brass key, then looked around the room that had once made her feel borrowed. I am not bound by the false packet, by Sir Percival's management, by Lady Celia's letter, or by anyone's pity. Lord Avington gave me a key, but he did not give me a chain. Adrian turned to her fully. For the first time since entering, he allowed the room to see not only his authority, but the vulnerable steadiness beneath it. Lady Isolde, he said, before these witnesses, with the truth spoken and your freedom restored, I ask what I should have asked without any will, any scandal, or any pressure. Will you choose me? The room disappeared at its edges. Isolde saw the torn glove, the key, the letter, the man who had failed her and then stood publicly inside that failure until it became accountability. She saw Lord Avington's kindness, her mother's portrait, the west corridor door opening under her hand. She was not being carried out of ruin. She was walking. She gave Adrian her answer clearly, so no one could mistake it for gratitude, rescue, or surrender. Yes, she said. Not because I was bound. Because I am free. A sound moved through the room, not applause, not yet. Something better. Shock becoming recognition. Sir Percival sank into a chair as though the hearth behind him had gone cold. Celia covered her face. Countess Whitmore nodded once, as if a verdict had been properly delivered. And on the table between the false letter and the true codicil, the old brass key caught the morning light like a small, stubborn flame. A few weeks later, when the first carriage wheels turned toward Harrowmere Hall, Isolde held that key in her gloved hand, no longer hiding it beneath her cuff. Harrowmere Hall rose from the Wiltshire hills as if it had been carved from restraint itself. Grey stone, long windows, an ancient chimney stood against a pale afternoon sky, while fields rolled away on either side of the drive for nearly a mile. Isolde watched the house grow larger through the carriage glass and felt no triumph, though society would have expected one. A woman once mocked as a poor relation was arriving at a duke's estate with a ring promised and a scandal silenced. Yet triumph belonged to people who wished to stand above others. Isolde wanted something quieter, and much rarer. She wanted to enter a door without losing herself behind it. Across from her, Adrian Vale watched not the house, but her face. You are very still, he said. I am trying to decide whether Harrowmere Hall means to welcome me or swallow me. His eyes moved toward the great facade. It has swallowed several generations of Vales. I intend to be the first to apologize for it. The answer surprised a laugh from her, small but real. He looked as if he would remember the sound. When the carriage stopped before the wide steps, the household waited in two orderly lines beneath the entrance arch. The housekeeper, Mrs. Thorne, stood in front with a ring of keys at her waist and a face trained into respect. Footmen, maids, the butler, and several estate servants watched with the careful curiosity of people who knew their master's reputation and did not yet know the woman who had changed his course. Adrian stepped down first, then offered his hand. Isolde looked at it. He did not close the distance. He waited. That waiting had become a language between them. She placed her gloved hand in his and descended, the old brass key warm in her other palm. Mrs. Thorne, Adrian said, his voice carrying across the stone steps, this is Lady Isolde Wren, who will be Duchess of Harrowmere if she continues generous enough to tolerate me. Her judgment is to be trusted. Her comfort is not to be treated as ornament. Her instructions, when given, carry my authority. The servants bowed and curtsied. Isolde felt the weight of their regard, but it did not crush her. He had not introduced her as rescued, pitied, or repaired. He had introduced her as capable. Mrs. Thorne curtsied again, deeper this time. Welcome to Harrowmere Hall, my lady. Isolde looked through the open doors into the great hall, where old portraits watched from dark paneling and late sunlight lay across the floor in long gold bars. "Thank you," she said. "I hope to deserve the work waiting here." Mrs. Thorne's expression softened by a fraction. "Work is a good beginning, my lady." Later, when the first formalities were done and tea had been refused by mutual silent agreement, Adrian took Isolde to a small room near the east side of the house. Mrs. Pember had remained within sight, comfortably installed near the open door with a rug over her knees and a novel she was not reading. The room contained a narrow cabinet of dark wood, plain against the elegance around it. On its front was a small brass lock. Isolde stopped before it. "Lord Avington sent this?" "5 years ago," Adrian said. "I did not know why. He wrote that it should remain unopened until Lady Isolde Wren came to Harrowmere with the key. At the time, I thought it one of his theatrical gestures. He was fond of those. He was fond of being right after everyone else looked foolish." She looked down at the old key. For a moment, Larkspur House returned to her, the west corridor, the locked drawer, the smell of old paper, the revelation that freedom had been kept waiting in the dark. This cabinet was different. No dread rose from it. Only the ache of a final message. She fitted the key into the lock. It turned easily. Inside lay a folded letter, a small packet of dried blue flowers, and a miniature watercolor of a cottage beside a stream. Isolde opened the letter first. Lord Avington's hand was weaker than in the codicil, but the words were clear. "My dear child, if you are reading this at Harrowmere, then you have opened at least one door others preferred shut. Remember this. Freedom first. Respect next. Love, if it comes, must arrive last, because only then can it be trusted not to disguise a chain." Isolde read the line twice. Her vision blurred, then cleared. Adrian stood beside her in silence, not intruding upon grief that belonged first to her. She handed him the letter when she was ready. He read it, and something in his face broke softly. "He knew me better than I deserved. He knew what you could become." Adrian folded the letter with care. "And what have I become?" Isolde looked at him, at the man society feared, the man who had failed her in public and then corrected himself before the same world that had watched the failure. "Not harmless," she said. "I would not ask that of you." His mouth curved faintly. "How merciful. But safe where it matters." The words altered him. He looked away for one breath, as though the room had suddenly become too bright. Then he took a set of papers from the cabinet shelf and placed them on the table. "Your settlement. Independent income. Residence secured. Funds restored through Bellamy's office. If you delay the wedding, if you change your mind, if you decide that a vicar in Devon truly does possess better manners, you remain protected." Isolde touched the top page. "You still mention that vicar. I consider him a useful rival. Imaginary men are less troublesome than real ones." She smiled, then grew serious. "You understand what this means to me?" "I am beginning to." "No," she said gently. "You are doing more than beginning." His gaze met hers. No crowd watched them now. No forged letter lay between them. No will turned them into argument. Still, restraint remained, not as distance, but as reverence. In the chapel that evening, with the door open and Mrs. Pember seated near the back pretending again to read, they stood beneath a narrow window where the last light touched the stone floor. There was no ceremony, no stolen vow, no impropriety dressed as romance. Only a promise spoken before God, conscience, and a woman old enough to cough if anyone behaved unwisely. Adrian looked at Isolde's gloved hand, where the repaired seam showed faintly. "I promise honesty before pride," he said. "I promise to ask before deciding. I promise never to call protection by that name if it requires your silence." Isolde's fingers closed around the blue ribbon at her wrist. "I promise courage before comfort. I promise not to mistake old fear for wisdom. I promise that if I stand beside you, it will be by choice, not because any door has closed behind me." Mrs. Pember sniffed. "Very sensible," she said, and turned a page upside down. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the parish church near Harrowmere, properly, publicly, and without spectacle. Countess Whitmore attended in dove grey and frightened two gossiping matrons into silence with one look. Mr. Bellamy stood near the back, solemn and proud. Mrs. Thorne wept once, discreetly, then denied it. Sir Percival did not attend. His affairs had gone to council, his stewardship was stripped, and invitations no longer found their way to his door. Celia was sent to live with a severe aunt in Bath, where even beauty had difficulty flourishing without an audience. Months passed. Harrowmere Hall changed, not loudly, but unmistakably. Isolde learned the tenants' names, read the accounts, dismissed waste before dismissing people, and began a benevolent subscription for gentlewomen in reduced circumstances, structured carefully so dignity was repaired rather than purchased. Adrian remained feared where fraud, cruelty, or polished lies entered a room. That part of him did not vanish. Isolde did not want it to. But servants no longer stiffened when he crossed the hall. Children from the tenant cottages ran to the drive when his horse appeared. Mrs. Thorne began leaving estate questions on Isolde's desk because they were answered faster there. One autumn evening, Isolde stood before the door of her private sitting room and tied the old brass key to a small hook beside it. Adrian watched from a few feet away. "Not locked away?" he asked. No, she touched the key once, lightly. It spent too long hidden. "And what will it open now?" She looked into the room beyond, where Lord Avington's letter lay framed on the desk, the blue flowers pressed beneath glass. "Memory, when I forget. Courage, when I require it. Perhaps the occasional cabinet, if Harrowmere continues to be mysterious." Adrian came to stand beside her, close but not crowding. "It suits the house better there than any portrait of my ancestors. Do not let them hear you. They have endured worse opinions from me." Outside, the hills darkened into evening. Inside, the house held warmth, lamplight, and the rare peace of a place where truth had not made love smaller. Isolde looked at the key, then at the open door, and understood at last what Lord Avington had hoped for her. Not rescue. Not revenge. Not even a duke, though love had come wearing one's name. He had wanted her to know the feel of a lock turning beneath her own hand. The wall had tried to bind her. The key had taught her to open. And love, at last, asked for neither her silence nor her surrender.